Welcome back, Twisters, and hey there, hockey fans. Nick here, and today we're going to be talking about the best low-key move this offseason for each NHL team that's in the Western Conference. So we'll examine trades and free agency to pick out some of these under-the-radar moves that might have a pretty sound impact for these NHL clubs here. And of course, if you're a fan of one of these teams, I want to know in the comments below, what was your team's best low-key move this offseason? I'm not talking about Zach Hyman or Pavel Buchnevich or the Fleury trade or anything like that. We're looking at the stuff that's a little bit below the surface there, the depth players and that sort of thing. And of course, I invite you, if you haven't already, to hit that red subscribe button down below and join the Twist Brigade as we march toward 2,000 subscribers. So without further ado, we're going to start with the Pacific Division teams alphabetically. Then I'll get into the Central Division. I'll also have a separate video on the Eastern Conference, but West is best, baby. So let's start with the Anaheim Ducks. And the move that I selected here was extending Alexander Volkov for another year. So the forward, Volkov, gets traded over from the Tampa Bay Lightning this last season, appears in 18 games with the Ducks, scores 4 goals and 4 assists for 8 points. So, I mean, not super glamorous, but nonetheless pretty good in that small sample size, appearing in a third-line role. Anaheim is desperate for some offensive productivity. They didn't really address that too much in the offseason because obviously the prospect pool. So I do like them bringing in Volkov. He really lit it up with the Syracuse Crunch as well. So this guy has more in the tank than he might have let on at the NHL level. But at just, I think, 23 years old, who knows? He deserves a fair shot, especially with a team like the Ducks. He could definitely help flourish in that role. For the Calgary Flames, I have selected Trevor Lewis. So you think of it this way, right? The Flames lost Mark Giordano to the expansion draft. It would help to add a little bit more veteran presence, I believe. A guy, even though he's a fourth liner, 34 years old, kind of approaching the twilight of his career, 1 year, $800,000. That's a good investment for somebody who has won 2 Stanley Cups before and might provide some of those intangibles for a team like Calgary to get back into the playoffs. For the Edmonton Oilers, I've selected Warren Fogle, previously from the Carolina Hurricanes. And I know that he's a fairly well-known player, but nonetheless, Edmonton's made a few pretty notable moves this offseason. So Fogle might be kind of slipping under the radar a little bit here. He adds what the Oilers need to the forward group. That's some depth scoring. And over the past 2 seasons with the Hurricanes, he has accumulated 50 points over 121 games. So in a depth role, that's actually pretty good. His advanced stats aren't bad either. Okay, for the Los Angeles Kings, I think that their best low-key move is extending Trevor Moore to 2 more seasons. His contract is 2 years at $1.875 million, so very affordable for a guy who broke out pretty well this past season. Now, the Kings, of course, acquired Victor Arvidsson. They signed Philip Danault. They brought Athanasiou back. And speaking of which, Athanasiou might not even be guaranteed a spot in the top 6 if you keep a guy like Adrian Kempe there. So he might slide down with Trevor Moore, and depending on that development from Gabe Vilardi, that could be a really good third line. Next up, my team, the San Jose Sharks. Now, I could have chosen maybe Andrew Cogliano, but I decided to choose Lane Peterson. So we acquired him for just a 2024 4th rounder from the Arizona Coyotes. This guy has only played in 15 NHL games, but he certainly deserves a shot. He only scored a goal and 2 assists with Arizona, but if you go to the AHL with the Tucson Roadrunners, this past season, he put up 17 points in just 16 games, nearly a point a game the season prior as well. So I like the potential for this. You know, this guy needs to kind of light a fire under some of those players who are competing for a bottom 6 role. But then again, for somebody who's used to playing in the top 6, you think of the Sharks in the current situation with Evander Kane, the trade rumors involving Timo Meier and Kevin Labanc. I'm not saying this guy is going to be a stud at all, but he could potentially fill in for a role like that if he's called upon. He's young. He can play center, but he's a right-handed shot. I would like to see him at the wing. So not a bad move for the price, $750K over the last 2 years. Okay, on to the Seattle Kraken. And for this one, I decided to choose their acquisition of a 2023 second-round draft pick in exchange for goaltender Vitek Vanacek. So Vanacek goes back to the Capitals, and in exchange, the Kraken get to build their draft picks. And of course, the Kraken ended up signing Philip Grubauer to go alongside Chris Driedger. So I think they played the goaltending situation as well as you can. So terrific move by Francis there. For the Vancouver Canucks, I've chosen the acquisition of goaltender Yaroslav Halak, now 36-year-old Yaroslav Halak, a long time in the NHL, a good veteran to pair with Thatcher Demko as he matures as a starting goaltender. And I know that Halak has played really well behind the Bruins defense, a good defense there. But I like Halak. He's always been a battler in his career. I think that Demko is going to certainly reap the benefits of having his presence in the locker room. And so, yeah, I've always liked Yaro Halak. I hope he does well over there. And speaking of goaltenders, once again, my next team for the Vegas Golden Knights, I've chosen their acquisition of Laurent Brossoit coming over from the Winnipeg Jets. So, of course, the Fleury trade was the big story there. The Golden Knights also traded for Yevgeny Dodonov. But you look at Laurent Brossoit, he's done a pretty nice job in Winnipeg this past season. .918 save, .923 even strength save percentage, 2.42 goals against. And now you put him behind a defense that has Pietrangelo, Alec Martinez, of course, re-signing, Braden McNabb, Zach Whitecloud's developing. You have Shea Theodore there too. It's a stingy, good defense. Now let's go to the Central Division, starting with a team that used to play in the Pacific, and that's the Arizona Coyotes. So for this one, I've chosen Ryan Dzingel. So Dzingel signed for just 1 year at $1.1 million. And this might be an opportunity for him to earn a better contract in future years, because with Arizona, they're going to be starved for goal production a little bit. You know, you think about, of course, Connor Garland being traded. OEL is gone as well in Vancouver. They lost Michael Bunting, who came on strongly last season. So I like Dzingel here. He played pretty well in Carolina his first season, but then he's been moving around the past couple of years. And so he needs to find kind of the right fit for him. Arizona, a top 6 role, that could at least give him a good reason to be signed to a better deal in the future. So I think that for $1.1 million, that's a good use of cap space for sure. Now to the Chicago Blackhawks, I have chosen the signing of forward Jujhar Khaira. So Khaira, 2 years, $975K, so under $1 million for a guy who I think if you want to get back into the playoffs, you need somebody like him on your team as well. I know they went out and got Fleury and they've made a couple other big moves, but Khaira, I like him because this guy is sandpaper. He is not afraid to hit, drop the gloves, block some shots out there, kill penalties. For a team like Chicago, that's going to be very important as well because defensively they're still a little bit weak back there. Next up for the Colorado Avalanche, this was a little tough, but I chose the extension of Tyson Jost, 2 years, $2 million average annual value. He's not a glamorous player. He's a third-line center, but at the center role, he improved quite a bit this past season. His face-offs were much better. So the previous season, he was just 33.3%. Then he went up to 46.8% this past year. So that's quite good. He's only 23 years old, and he can spend a lot of time on the penalty kill if necessary. He was 4th among forwards in that category. So overall, a very good emerging depth player for the Colorado Avalanche. For the Dallas Stars, I've chosen center Luke Glendening. He's 32 years old. He was signed to a 2-year deal at $1.5 million. So for a guy who's going to play probably on your 4th line, that's maybe a little bit steeper than what you would expect, but nonetheless, this guy is very good in his role. Look at his face-off percentage last year, 60.9%, and he took plenty of draws last season, and he blocked 57 shots in 54 games. Can probably also kill some penalties there. Dallas is kind of an old team, I will say, but nonetheless, if you get into that playoff conversation and go to the playoffs, having a guy like Glendening will definitely help. Next up for the Minnesota Wild, I have chosen defenseman Dmitry Kulikov. So the Wild lost Carson Soucy to the Kraken in the expansion draft, and of course they also lost Ryan Suter. I like Kulikov to kind of be a replacement there for Carson Soucy, even though I like Soucy maybe a little bit more. 2 years at $2.5 million average annual value. So very affordable for a guy who could slide into the second pairing if necessary. I see him more as kind of a third pairing defenseman. It's not a huge gamble. It's not a big splash by any means, but nonetheless, it helps Minnesota address that void as they head deeper into the offseason. Next up for the Nashville Predators, I selected defenseman Philippe Myers, who came over in the Ryan Ellis trade. So his contract is 2 years at $2.55 million. A guy who can play second pairing if necessary there. He's only 24 years old too, so he is developing. But imagine if a guy like him, right-handed shot, is playing next to Roman Josi potentially, then things get a little bit more favorable for him out there. Not to mention last year, The goaltending in Philadelphia was pretty bad. That's not just the goaltending, it's also the defense. But now he gets to play with Jussi Saros, who had a really good second half last season and was extended as well. Next up for the St. Louis Blues, this was maybe the most difficult, but I decided to choose the extension of Ivan Barbashev to a 2-year deal at $2.5 million, or excuse me, $2.25 million average annual value. He was third among Blues forwards in penalty kill time per game, so this guy is not afraid to play shorthanded. He is physical. He's not afraid to use his body out there. I've seen that before in the playoffs. And overall, just a good defensive skill set from Barbashev. A bit of scoring upside, actually, but first and foremost, you do want to value what he's able to do at your own end of the ice. And lastly, for the Winnipeg Jets, now they acquired Nate Schmidt in a trade, but I want to talk about Brendan Dillon. Now, Shark fan favorite. We love Brendan Dillon. Dillon has emerged as a good top 4 defenseman. He's a stay-at-home defenseman who can play physically, 6'4", 225 pounds out there. He's not afraid to drop the gloves if need be. But I really like how his skill set helps solidify that back end for the Winnipeg Jets. They lost Brossoit, of course, in free agency, so it's not just going to be Connor Hellebuyck trying to stop the puck back there. But now you've got, of course, Schmidt, Pionk, DeMello, Logan Stanley, and you've got Brendan Dillon now. So this is overall a good defensive core. This team was criticized quite a bit the past couple of off seasons for not addressing the defense. He'll probably play on that second pairing, I would think. And lastly, with Dillon, what I really like about him is his locker room presence. He's a very loose, down-to-earth, approachable guy there. So he's the one who's going to help keep players kind of even keel emotionally through the course of the season and into the postseason. Anyway, guys, that's going to do it for the Western Conference. And of course, if you're a fan of these teams, let me know down in the comments below, what is the best low-key move that your team made this offseason? Lots of players I didn't think about because they were signed to two-way deals or minor league contracts or have only played a handful of games in the NHL. But of course, feel free to sound off down in the comments below. I hope you found this video useful and informational, and if you enjoyed it, give it a big thumbs up. Subscribe down below and stick around for the Eastern Conference version of this video as well. Thanks so much for tuning in, Twisters. Once again, I'm Nick, and I'll catch you later. Ciao.